59%. Researchers bought 200 used hard drives off online marketplaces, and more than half of them still had the previous owner's files sitting right there. Passports, tax returns, payroll spreadsheets. Nobody hacked anything to find that data. The sellers just hit delete, emptied the recycle bin, and assumed the files were gone forever. That assumption is one of the most expensive mistakes in all of security, and it lives right here in asset management.
And to be clear, those were not amateurs in most cases. Some of those drives came from small businesses that genuinely believed they had wiped them. Delete is not destroy. That is the whole episode in 4 words. When you delete a file, the operating system just removes the pointer that tells it where the file lives. The bytes themselves stay sitting on the platter, completely intact, until something else happens to overwrite that exact spot.
And there is one method later in this video that wipes an entire encrypted drive in seconds without touching a single byte of your data. Hold on to that, because it sounds impossible until you see why it works.
Hi all, Kim here. The objective's own words are acquisition, assignment, monitoring, and disposal. People skip this domain because it sounds like paperwork, but the exam leans on it hard and the real world punishes every gap in it.
Leo here, and I will put real money on this being the most underrated topic in the whole certification. 200 drives bought in one study, and 59% leaked their previous owner. That is not a rounding error. That is the same process failure repeating at scale across companies and individuals who all believed they had done the right thing. So stick with me, because by the end of this you will be in the much smaller group that actually wipes a drive correctly.
Right, Leo. And sanitization is the control that closes that gap. So the promise here is simple. Sit with us for the next 20 minutes and you will never trust an empty recycle bin again. Before we build the life cycle, Kim has been holding the question that shows up under every single asset disposal discussion on the internet. Kim, go ahead and frame it for everyone.
Yes, and it is the exact question that decides whether your data leaks. If I empty the recycle bin and then reformat the drive, is my data actually gone, or is it still recoverable by anyone who bothers to try?
That question hangs over this whole topic, so let us earn the answer. We start where every asset does, at the beginning, and then we follow one all the way to its grave. Asset management is a life cycle, not a one-time spreadsheet. Every asset is born, it gets assigned, it is tracked, and eventually it dies. The exam tests every stage of that journey. So let me sketch the loop before we walk it cradle to grave. 4 stages, and they run in a circle because retiring one asset usually triggers acquiring its replacement. Acquisition, then assignment, then monitoring, then disposal, and back around again.
It starts before you even own the thing. The objective calls that first stage acquisition and procurement, and it is not just clicking buy. There is a formal process, usually starting with an end user who has a genuine need, then budget analysis, then formal sign-off from both IT and the purchasing department. Acquisition means a controlled purchase with approval, not a personal credit card and a hope. The security point is simple. If procurement is sloppy, unsupported hardware and unvetted software walk in the front door with nobody accountable for them.
And that accountability is the next stage, assignment and ownership. The handbook's own framing is that every asset must have a named owner, one specific person responsible for it. Think of it like a library book, which is a comparison I will defend to the death. The moment it leaves the shelf, the system records exactly who checked it out. So when a laptop with customer data goes missing, you are not guessing. You know whose name is on it and who is accountable.
And ownership is not just for the loss case, it is for the whole life of the asset. The owner approves who else gets access, the owner signs off when it is patched, and the owner is the one who authorizes its disposal at the end. One name follows the device from birth to grave.
Classification rides along with ownership, Kim. Classification labels the data itself public, internal, confidential, restricted, and that label decides the handling rules for the whole asset. A confidential laptop and a kiosk in the lobby are both assets, but they will be encrypted, monitored, and disposed of in completely different ways. Why? Because their classification is different, and that one label drives every protection decision downstream all the way to how you destroy them.
Now here is the warning the exam loves to test. The asset you cannot protect is the one you do not know you have. Shadow IT, the personal cloud account, or the unapproved switch someone quietly plugged in, never enters your inventory. And because it never enters the inventory, it never gets patched, never gets monitored, and crucially for today, never gets sanitized when it dies. It is a permanent blind spot.
And that blind spot is not theoretical. Some of the worst breaches in the last decade started on a device the security team did not even know was connected. You cannot defend, monitor, or properly retire an asset that is invisible to you, so getting the inventory complete is step 0 for everything else in this certification.
Which is why inventory and enumeration are the heartbeat of this entire domain. Let me draw the line between them precisely, because the exam treats them as two different words for a reason. Inventory is your maintained record, the list of what you believe you own. Enumeration is the active discovery. It is going out onto the live network and asking every address what is actually there, right now. Inventory is the map. Enumeration is walking the territory, and the two never quite agree.
And the gap between the map and the territory is exactly where breaches hide. Your inventory says 40 servers, enumeration finds 43. Those 3 extra boxes are the ones nobody is watching, and Kai is about to make that painfully real.
Real quick, because this next part matters to you. If any of this is helping, tap that like button, then hit subscribe and ring the bell so the next one finds you. Both are free and take about a second, but they tell the algorithm to show this to one more person who needs it.
Let me make enumeration real instead of abstract. A lot of courses describe this on a static slide. We are going to actually run it in an authorized lab network we own and watch the assets appear one by one.
This is the part I love, Kai. A diagram tells you enumeration exists. Watching the hosts pop up tells you what it feels like to be the analyst.
Exactly. The tool every security professional reaches for here is InMap, and we are doing a host discovery sweep. It just asks every address on the subnet one simple question, are you alive? And that is the fastest way to turn a vague inventory into a real list of living hosts. Host discovery is the first move. One flag, one subnet, and the network tells you who actually lives there.
So the -SN flag is host discovery, no port scan, just a ping sweep. And already the scan found a host. There is a file server and a printer answering on that subnet, both real assets that belong in the inventory.
But watch what happens when we let the sweep finish the whole range. This next host is the one nobody on the team knew about.
There it is, an unknown device, no hostname, an unrecognized vendor, answering on the corporate subnet. The inventory said 3 hosts. Enumeration found 4. That 4th box is shadowy, and it is exactly the asset an attacker prays you have. Unknown, unmanaged, and sitting wide open in the middle of everything you do protect.
And that is why it is the worst kind of host, Leo. Nobody patches it because nobody knows it exists.
Right, Kim? Nobody monitors its logs, nobody updates it, and when it is finally retired, nobody sanitizes it. Every single protection in your entire program quietly skips the asset that never made the list.
So the discipline is reconciliation. Run enumeration, compare it line by line against your inventory, and chase down every difference until each device has a name and an owner. The scan is not the finish line. Closing the gap is.
And just so the exam vocabulary is clean, a scan like this is active discovery. You are sending packets and touching the hosts. There is also passive discovery where you just listen to traffic and learn what is on the wire without poking anything.
Right, and in a mature shop you do not just scan once a quarter, Kim. You run agents. A small piece of software on each managed endpoint reports back continuously, so your inventory updates itself in near real time instead of going stale the moment the scan finishes.
Which is the whole point. An inventory is only as good as the day it was last verified. A device added Tuesday and forgotten by Friday is back to being invisible. Continuous enumeration is what keeps the map honest.
There is one definitional question that decides whether someone passes this kind of item, and Kim flagged it earlier as the thing first-timers always trip on. Let me hand it to her cleanly.
Go ahead, Kim. You called this one, and it is the exact distinction the exam loves to blur.
What is the actual difference between inventory and enumeration, and why does the exam treat them as two separate things instead of one? Here is the clean line. Inventory is the record you maintain, the list of what you believe you own. Enumeration is the live act of going out and proving what is actually there. One is the claim, the other is the evidence, and on the exam the wrong one is always the tempting answer.
And the takeaway is that the two are partners, not rivals. Enumeration feeds the inventory tells you which discovered hosts are expected, and the difference between them is your prioritized to-do list. Run them together and you stop guessing what is on your network.
This is the demo that makes sanitization click. We are going to create a file with a secret in it, delete it the normal way, and then bring it straight back from the dead. Lab machine, our own data, defensive understanding only. The whole point is to feel the gap between what delete looks like and what delete actually does. Once you see the file come back, you will never trust an empty recycle bin again.
And this is not a party trick, it is the literal mechanism behind that 59% figure. The researchers did not crack anything. They ran exactly the kind of tool Kai is about to run.
A deleted file is fully recoverable until something overwrites those exact blocks. Here is the file, here is the secret inside it, and here is me deleting it the way 99% of people do. Gone. Right. The file is not in the listing, the recycle bin is empty, the user moves on. But RM only unlinked the pointer. The bytes are still sitting on the disk untouched, and a recovery tool reads the raw filestem and rebuilds them.
And there is the social security number, back from the grave. That is the entire resold drive study live in about 10 seconds. The seller deleted the file, the buyer ran one free tool, and the data was never actually gone.
And notice nothing exotic happened there, Leo. No soldering, no clean room. That is a community recovery tool reading the file system journal, which is why even a casual buyer can do it.
I want to bring in someone who does this for a living, because the textbook version always sounds tidier than reality. We have a data sanitization specialist on the line who has personally examined stacks of supposedly wiped drives. Let me dial them in now.
Happy to be here, and honestly, what you just showed is the easy version. The drives that scare me are the ones where someone ran a single overwrite pass and felt safe, because on certain drives that is not enough.
That is exactly the gap I wanted you to speak to. What is the most common mistake you actually see when an organization tries to wipe its own drives before disposal?
Treating every drive the same, they take a process that works on a spinning hard disk, a multi-pass overwrite, and they run it on a solid-state drive, where the controller quietly hides old copies in spare cells. The overwrite reports success and the data is still recoverable. It is the single most common false sense of security in disposal.
So the lesson is match the method to the media, not to the habit. And what about the certificate side, the paperwork people skip?
That paperwork is the part regulators actually check. When a drive leaves your building for a third-party destruction vendor, the certificate with each serial number is the only thing that proves the drive you sent is the drive that died. Without it, you simply cannot show due diligence after a breach. And that gap is what turns an incident into a fine.
That grounds it perfectly, and it sets up the back half of this episode. Thank you for calling in. Stay with us if you can. Kai, take us through the correct wipe now.
So now we do it correctly. Shred overwrites the actual blocks with random data, multiple passes, then removes the file. After this, the recovery tool reads the same location and finds nothing but noise.
Overwritten. The bytes themselves are gone now, not just the pointer. The -3 sets 3 random passes, The Z adds a final 0 pass to hide that shredding happened, and the U removes the file after.
Two important cousins for the exam. On Windows, you cannot shred easily, but cipher/W overwrites all the free space on a volume, scrubbing files you already deleted. Let me clear the screen and show the cross-platform set together.
And before the SSD command, explain the why, Leo, because this is the part that trips people. Why can you not just shred a solid-state drive the same way?
Great setup, Kim. It comes down to wear leveling. An SSD spreads writes across its flash cells to make them last, and it secretly keeps spare hidden cells in reserve. So when you tell it to overwrite a block, the controller may write your new data somewhere else entirely and leave the original copy hiding in a spare cell. So the software thinks it overwrote the secret, but a hidden copy of it is still physically on the chip, untouched, waiting for a forensic tool. That is why the one that actually matters in 2026 is different. For an SSD, you issue the drive's own secure erase, or you destroy the encryption key, and blkdiscard with the secure flag tells the controller to do exactly that.
So the lesson lands hard. Delete is a pointer, shred, cipher, and blkdiscard touch the bytes. And on flash storage, the only reliable wipe is the drive's own secure erase or destroying the key, never a software overwrite.
Let me ground this in one person because the abstract version lets people off the hook. Picture Diego, a small clinic office manager who upgrades 12 workstations and sells the old ones to recoup about $900. Diego does what feels responsible. He deletes the patient folders and reformats each drive before listing them. 6 months later, one buyer recovers thousands of medical records off a single disk, and that $900 recovery turns into a reportable breach with fines that dwarf it.
And the fix for Diego cost nothing extra. One Purge level secure erase per drive instead of a reformat, and a 30-second log of the serial numbers. Same $900 in his pocket, zero breach. That is the entire value of getting 4.2 right.
Now the standard the exam wants you to name out loud. When CompTIA asks how to dispose of media, the answer lives in NIST's Special Publication 800-88, Guidelines for Media Sanitization, published in 2014.
And that is the document to memorize by number, because the exam will reward you for naming it.
It does, Emma, and 888 does not hand you one method. It hands you a decision based on two things: how sensitive the data is and whether you ever plan to reuse the media. Let me put the three categories side by side. 3 levels, increasing in strength. Clear is the gentlest, destroy is the most final.
Clear is a logical overwrite. It protects against simple recovery, the keyboard attack, someone running a recovery tool like we just did. The drive stays usable, so clear is what you use when the device gets reissued inside the company.
Purge is the level up. It protects against a laboratory attack, somebody with the budget to open the drive and read the platters directly. Purge means cryptographic erase, block erase, or degaussing, and it is your move when the drive leaves your control but might be resold.
And cryptographic erase is the elegant one. If the whole drive was encrypted, you do not overwrite a single byte. You just destroy the encryption key and every block instantly becomes unreadable noise. That is why self-encrypting drives wipe in seconds, not hours.
Here is the trap CompTIA sets, and people fall for it constantly. Degaussing is a purge method, but only for magnetic media. A degausser wipes a hard drive or a tape with a magnetic field.
Degaussing does nothing to a solid-state drive, none. An SSD stores data in flash cells, not magnetic domains, so the magnet has nothing to grab. Run an SSD through a degausser and the data is still perfectly intact.
Destroy is the final category, and it looks exactly like it sounds. Shred the platters, pulverize them, incinerate or disintegrate the media until it is never reusable again. Destroy is reserved for your most sensitive data, where reuse is off the table and only physical annihilation will do.
And notice what is under the hammer there. Those are solid-state drives, the exact media a degausser cannot touch. So for an SSD that holds your crown jewels, physical destruction is often the only method you fully trust.
And every destruction needs a receipt, because in security, if you cannot prove it, it did not happen. The certificate of destruction is that proof, a signed document from the disposal vendor listing each serial number and how it was destroyed.
And that certificate is also your chain of custody for the disposal. When you hand a pallet of dead drives to a third-party shredding vendor, those drives are out of your sight. The certificate with serial numbers is what proves the drive you sent is the drive that got destroyed and not the one that ended up on eBay.
Which connects straight to a phrase from Objective 4.2 you should know, end of life and legacy. End of life means the vendor stopped supporting it, no more patches. Legacy means it is so old it should already be retired. Both are decommissioning triggers.
And decommissioning is the formal retirement step, Leo. You remove the asset from active service, you sanitize its data, you update the inventory to show it is gone, and only then is the life cycle actually closed. Skip the inventory update and you have a ghost record forever.
Which feeds the last sub-objective, data retention. You cannot destroy what a law says you must keep. Retention policy tells you how long to hold data, and you sanitize on the day that clock runs out, not a year early and not a decade late.
And retention cuts both ways, which is the nuance the exam likes. Holding data too long is its own risk, because every record you keep past its required date is just more for an attacker to steal. Minimum necessary, then sanitize.
Here is where I will gently push back on the reflex answer though. A lot of people hear all this and conclude shred everything, destroy is always safest. And for your most sensitive media, sure, but destroy means the drive is gone forever, which has a real cost, the hardware value and the e-waste. For most internal reuse, a proper clear is the right call, and for resale, a verified purge with a certificate is both safer for your wallet and good enough for the data. Match the method to the actual risk. Do not just nuke everything by default.
That is the honest verdict, Leo. Destroy when reuse is truly off the table. Purge when it leaves your hands but the hardware still has value. Clear when it stays in the family. The strongest program is the one that picks correctly, not the one that picks hardest. If you forget everything else from this episode, remember this one line. Match the wipe to the answer of a single question. Does this drive leave my control? If it stays inside the company, you clear it. If it leaves and might be resold, you purge it. And if it is top secret, you destroy it and keep the certificate. Let us lock in Objective 4.2. Asset management is the full life cycle, and disposal is where data leaks. Delete is a pointer, sanitization touches the bytes, and NIST 888 gives you clear, purge, or destroy.
So here's what you can do tonight. Before you ever sell or recycle a drive, ask yourself the one question: does this leave my control? And if it does, purge it instead of deleting it. That single habit puts you outside the 59% who leak.
And next episode answers the loose thread we left dangling. We watched one untracked host appear on the network, so the question is, how does an attacker turn that single forgotten box into a full intrusion? That is where vulnerability scanning comes in.
If Clear, Purge, Destroy finally clicked, hit like and subscribe so the next objective lands in your feed, and go drill the free practice quizzes on the CERT site. We are building the whole series one objective at a time.
Here is the one to leave in the comments. Look at the device you are watching this on right now. When it finally dies, do you actually know how you would sanitize it, clear, purge, or destroy?
This is Emma, thanks for watching and signing off.